Welcome back to another Human First AI Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague at Avenue 9. Avenue9.com is the website. Tim Kalinowski is my guest this week. Tim is from Lore. You can find him at loretold.com, a award-winning creative expert, president of Lore, and they do content creation and storytelling. And I'm really excited, Tim, to talk to you this week because I think that I always say AI can tell a story, but it can't tell your story. It's missing the context of like what you're trying to say. And so it's a great tool to help you tell a story, but it really doesn't solve the problem of like what story you're telling. How is that helping your marketing or brand and stuff? What's your take on AI and storytelling?
Okay. So, I mean, a generalization on storytelling, which is kind of the foundation of everything that I'll talk about, and then we'll weave AI into that, which is your story is always about an experience. And, you know, our tagline is every experience is a story waiting to be told. And I think that is an incredibly true statement yesterday, today, and it will be tomorrow. It's, you know, evergreen and everlasting. And if your story doesn't have an experience built into it, it's not going to be authentic. And if it's not authentic, it's not going to resonate. And if it's not going to resonate, you won't achieve your goals. So when we weave AI into that, it becomes really interesting, right? Because AI is a learning model that will learn what you're teaching it. So, you know, we go back and it's how do you find the human story and then use AI in different ways. One of the ways we use it is actually to test stories and, you know, create some modeling to figure out audiences a little better too, right? So for example, let's say I meet with a client, they've got you know, a new product, new service, a new launch, something going on. And we'll start with what we call the 5-star review, which has nothing to do with somebody rating them 5 stars. But the idea is if I asked one of your customers to rate you 5-star, what story would they tell me? Right. So
I like that.
Right. So let's find those authentic stories. Then we can take that and kind of proof out or test with them who their customers are, you know, what resonates with them. And we can actually create tests with using AI to start testing different content, different creative, different ads, different whatever it might be, and see, well, where is this falling short? You know, is there something missing within that story? So for us, it's become a really dynamic tool that can accelerate things a bit more than just, you know, I think a lot of people lean on it as a crutch to try to make something. And I think that's where it falls short, because if you just use AI to make something without the right inputs, it doesn't sound very human or authentic usually.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
I think we'll get there. I'm excited to dive into all of that with you. I love your first point that AI doesn't have the experiences, right? If your story is about an experience, it is learning from other people's experiences. We can
Right.
input ours, but it's not having any experiences of its own right now. So that I think that's a great metaphor of like what the essence of your story is, or your brand story, and what's happening to you is you have this specific and unique experience that nobody else has as a human, and we got to get that in there. I also love Airbnb had that analogy of the different star reviews. Have you read that book?
No.
Heard that concept? Well, basically they were like, you know, thinking of like, you know, their experiences at an Airbnb, like what would a 5-star experience
Okay.
be like? Okay, what's 1 star? You showed up, nothing was there, like, you know, the place is empty, you're in some creepy dude's you know, spare room, and it's a 1-star experience. And they were like, well, what would 5-star be? 5-star would be they knew what your favorite music was. It was on the radio. They have your favorite food stocks. Like they picked you up in a limo. Like awesome. But then he kind of challenged people to keep leveling it up. Of like, okay, what's a 6-star review? What's a 7-star review? What would a 10-star review look like? The best experience in the world. And it really kind of put into perspective for me. You have to challenge yourself a little bit to create magical experiences for other people. So if you want them to talk about it, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's, you know, the best stories have some level of truth, if not 100% truth in them, right? So they've got to be realistic. They've got to be something that people can, you know, we call it the aha moment, when somebody can look at something and go, oh yeah, I need that. I need to be there. I see myself there, you know, and that's what really moves the needle. And I think most people forget that.
Yeah, I like that aha moment, or I just call it the hell yes. That's another book, Hell Yes or No.
Yeah.
If people are readers out there, but you want that. This is a no brainer. Yeah, the please take my money moment. Like I
Yeah,
want this. I want on this experience, right?
1000%. I mean, why do they put magazines and candy bars at the checkout line, right? It's something that everybody can really accept and understand, and they're like, whoa, I could see myself driving home eating a Snickers. I'm a little hangry right now. I'm gonna take it anyway. Making it easy is a huge part of it too.
Yeah, I think so, which is great. And I wanted to talk to you then and dive deeper about the creative experience now, because I do think it's changing. You mentioned using some of those tools to create the stories. I think we can circle back to finding that story and that experience to tell on really your mission. But I feel like that's kind of core marketing. In this AI marketing age, how has that changed? It seems like you at Lore seem to lean a lot on video, but I could be wrong. How do you tell stories, and what tools do you use to tell them?
Okay, so there's like 10 questions in there.
There is. Pick your favorite.
So, in terms of services that we offer and kind of what we do, and yes, we do a ton of video. When I started the business, which this week is our 10th anniversary, the idea was really brand storytelling, branding, and that somehow was a huge part of my career for nearly 20 years before I started the business. And, looking back and trying to understand what that was, it was a little naive, because I think from a business perspective, from a sellability perspective, I 1000% believe that storytelling should be the forefront of everything we do. But it wasn't the most easy thing to market at first. And so I would get clients that wanted us to do a little bit of that background work and help them understanding who they were, what their narrative was, the Simon Sinek, their why, what are all those elements
Right.
behind the scene. And then it was, well, can you make it for me? And I was like, well, yeah, I have experience in that, but I guess we've never thought about the company doing that. So, the growth of the company started to become what clients need in order to create the shell to deliver those stories, not just, hey, here's the narrative, go do it. It was, okay, yeah, we'll buy a building and create a soundstage and studio. We'll, add a media team. We'll add, 4 developers that can build website. It was all of the things and vehicles along the way to help deliver the story was what I found to be, what was profitable and what made the business grow.
Right.
But everything has always been right down to, I even, when we talk about SEO, I believe storytelling is kind of the cornerstone of SEO in a way. While there's a lot of analytics and, very hard data that goes into that, not being able to weave that into a story is a failure.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, and it's not popular in marketing circles because I think people like easy things to measure, like SEO and keyword stuffing and
Yeah,
fitting the
for sure.
algorithm on social media and stuff. But the reason I picked human first marketing here is because I think you have to have the story first. The whole point is to attract the attention of a human and get them to change their behavior. And so optimizing your marketing for the search engine is pretty stupid. The search engine can't buy anything, right? Some humans got to be on the other side of that.
Well,
Now,
yeah, I think,
within that, once we have that core essence, then there's some things we can do.
yeah, for sure. I'm sorry for that interruption, but you're right. So some fast facts. The idea that technology can remove human psychology, I think, is kind of where that line gets drawn. And so when you think about, what a story can do, it's something like 22 times, consumer is going to remember a story 22 times more than just something that's presented as data or, a simple fact, right? So imagine that 22 times, 22x is a lot when you look at what can be remembered or not remembered. And, then you get into other ones like 68% of consumers want to digest a story and are more likely to buy something that they feel an experience with than just something that's presented to them. And I know that there's a lot of debate out there. Amazon's wildly successful, and they don't, base anything that they're doing on storytelling. They base it all on price. And I would argue it's also security and delivery and access. Around where I live, I can order something in the morning and sometimes it shows up by the end of the day. So yeah, I can't drive to the store and take time out of the day sometimes before I can have it delivered to my house. So that is an experience, and people forget that. Like, it's not that they're just buying a product, they're buying an experience. It's just that experience makes their life really simple.
Yeah, I think it's a story you're telling yourself about being able to like summon things to your door, like you're a 14th century king or something like that, and living in a futuristic time where I feel like we're of similar age here, Tim. When we grew up, it took longer for a page to load than it does for stuff to get to your house. Now, do you remember downloading images or
Oh,
songs or like trying to steal a video on Napster and it would take all day? Like you can literally have stuff shipped to Amazon to your house faster today than you
uh,
could download a video.
for sure. I mean, I remember when I started my career, the way computers worked back then, and one of my earlier jobs, I started in business school and then said, all right, business is great. I actually want to get back into communications and marketing because I was interested in that in high school and transition. But somewhere in college, after I started in communications, I had a job working at a pre-production house to kind of get experience in what that meant. And back then they still had stat cameras, and they had a group of people called strippers, which I would snicker about every time I'd walk by the room because it was a bunch of, people with razor blades cutting basically negatives and, taping them together to make a printing plate. But I could get into work in the morning, turn on my computer, and I'd like go get a cup of coffee. I'd come back, my computer would be booted, and then I'd look at my sheet of what I had to do for the day. Okay, I need to open Cork Express or whatever the software was back then, which you're
Yeah.
laughing, so you remember it. And then you'd open that software. Then you could go talk to all your friends for 10, 15 minutes, come back. And by then, the software might be open. And then you could go and figure out where you could find the file. And then you'd open the file. So usually, 30 to 45 minutes after you got to work, you could start working because the technology had caught up to where you were. And so, yeah, it's the way that we can do things today and the speed at which we do things is almost hard to imagine, from where my career started to where it is now.
Yeah, I remember, now we leave 1,000 tabs open because we can and we're distracted by other stuff. But I remember back in the day leaving programs open just so that I didn't have to load the file again because the audio or the video would take so long to load.
Right.
Um, Even Photoshop and stuff would take so long to load that you're like, I don't want to waste half an hour in the morning. Which brings me to the ninth part of my 10-part question, which is like, how have you seen the tools changing over the last 2 years, or maybe even the mediums for storytelling in your career? What do you think is the best way to tell a story now?
Hmm. Uh, I- it's funny. Things get shorter and faster all the time, right? So, I look at TikTok from, like 2019 to 2020. If you look at what ByteDance had done before that with Musically, if anybody remembers Musically before it became TikTok, they were short stories. And the format at first was obviously a lot of dancing and goofing around and catered to teenage girls more than anybody else. And during the pandemic, that cultural shift of everybody being at home, I think changed storytelling and the landscape entirely, right? So it went from less than a minute to now they're allowing 3 minutes, but people are packing incredible stories in 1 to 3 minutes, and people get lost for hours doing this.
Yeah, find that fascinating. I heard another expert say that people think that there is a trend, but usually there's like a vector, a bifurcation of stuff, and that's kind of what I've seen is that storytelling is either going short, and it's like the grab your attention and then grab your attention again kind of version, like the Mr. Beast model is like, let's just do something amazing every 2 minutes, and that way we never lose people. But there's also these 3-hour Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, storytelling and epics. And I think even movies now, we're kind of seeing on, the streaming services that a season of a show is really what like a movie was. It's not in my opinion, it's not a show because it's not, 24 episodes. It's 12, but that's a 12 to 24-hour story that they're telling. This movie structure and the story has become longer a little bit, and then other things are bite-sized. But I feel like we're kind of losing the middle ground of stuff. Is that fair?
Yeah. So I look at it like this. Have you ever heard of, I always bring this up, Gustav Freytag and the Freytag's pyramid, which is,
No.
It's a really obscure thing. And, being a storyteller, of course, I research all kinds of strange things. But, what he did was he started looking at theater and plays and music. And so we're talking 1820s, I believe. He started mapping trends of a story, and kind of made a pyramid. And of course, the climax of the story is the peak of the pyramid. So if you look at whether you're talking about Joe Rogan's podcast or some TikToks or whatever, or even, the translation of a movie into a series, everything has the arc of a story in it. If people are listening to it, if you really watch for it, you're going to find like, okay, what is that opening moment? What is capturing my attention? And then what is it, what they call the rising action or the challenge? Like what is the thing that people are starting to gather around and go, okay, that's interesting. Why is that challenge there? And then they find the climax and they go, oh, there's that moment. And now they're starting to find that resolution. And, if you translate it to your brand or your product, you can start to say, okay, well, I'm capturing attention. I'm creating a challenge. Like, what is the experience that I need to solve? Creates the climax where you see that problem being solved, or what the aha moment, like I called it, was. And then as you're coming down, now you're seeing like how this impacts your life. Where do you get it? All of those types of things. So I look at all of those mediums and go, even a 2-hour podcast, it's almost like moments of little pyramids along the way, right? They go from topic to topic, much like we're doing, and people go, oh, that's great. And then they, of course, and I'm sure you'll do this too, we'll take little snippets of our conversation, and each one becomes a social media post because it's a miniature little story that's part of a larger story, of course, but it is what people are looking for, and people are consuming these stories without realizing that they're following that diagram time and time again, thousands of times a day, probably.
And now I get to clip that, and it's going to be a 1-minute short. So for the setup, we'll make it very meta this time. I agree. I think there are lots of it, and I like to have these conversations in sort of the medium format, and then turn them into the smaller pieces of content, or repurpose it into other things. So what I think is so cool, and what I'm trying to do at Avenue 9, is collect these stories. Like, I love to meet people. I love to ask questions. I've been, an interviewer for a long time now, over a decade. And so if I can capture somebody's story, now all of a sudden with AI tools, we can do all kinds of stuff. We can turn it into a 1-minute story. Yeah. We can turn it into a book. We can make a blog. We can, write testimonials and case studies and reviews, or do a whole lot of things with that data that we weren't ever possible before. And I think AI is also doing that for other storytelling mediums, that now you can personalize the story to the audience. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be the brand story. It can be a very where we used to have personas, we can actually have people now. So I can tell this story just for Tim instead of telling it to Tim's persona of a creative agency president. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, when we use AI, one of the things that we like to do is create a chat based on a client or a product or an experience, and then add to it. So I think most people, well, I shouldn't say that. I think a lot of people don't realize the power that we have to teach AI in a closed loop environment, right? So it's lost on a lot of people, but the power is if you have a client and you create a brand narrative and a brand story and all of those, the brand guidelines, you can teach AI all of those things. And now you can go back and look at the experience and then overlay those experiences with what that brand is, and then use AI to, you can come up with ideas like brainstorming, and they'll come pretty close sometimes. I think I usually find that we haven't met an AI tool that, is silver bullet that, I go, yeah, let's deliver that. That's what I want the client to have. I in 5 years or 10 years, could that be the case? It's growingly possible and likely. Today, no, but you can get pretty far and you can come close with things by learning how to use the tools really effectively. And like I said, when you're talking about research and proving things out, now you have a baseline model. It's like, does this answer these questions for these people? Yes or no? Or give me a suggestion of how this meets that. And it's really impressive to go, oh shoot, I missed something. And I think that's where the AI and the human interaction really gets powerful, is when a human can go, shoot, I missed that. That's interesting. Now, how do I take that, translate it, and make something more powerful? And of course, the speed in which it's happening is, unfathomable sometimes.
Yeah, there's all of that. I also think we're unlocking a new level of creativity where I don't think storytellers have realized yet that there are different storytelling mediums available, that you could use this custom AI chatbot that you're talking about. Like once you load all your data and your story like a chatbot, you could use it almost as like a choose your own ending model for the prospect. And so if whoever you're trying to sell to or something could ask different questions or take the story in different directions that you're telling and create their own story inside of it, or the power of the images and stuff that we're able to create now, or even short form video that it used to be, blockbuster movies with hundreds of millions of dollars could use CGI and make stuff, and now anybody sitting in their house can basically, if you have an idea, make 10 seconds of video about it and then stitch another 10 seconds together and do scene by scene, create whatever you have in your mind. I don't think humans have come to grips with what these tools are going to be able to let us do with storytelling. And I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's. I'm really curious, actually, a little bit about what you've done with it, because from my experience and the standard of quality and just kind of, we've tried, we've definitely thought like, oh, let's see if we don't need to do a photo shoot for this. Let's,
Right.
let's tell, we had something happened around Christmas time. We had a client that was doing some Christmas promotions. I was like, okay, this could be easy for AI. Create a Christmas background, take these products. We had, simple product shots already in the library. And somehow every time it changed the label of the product, or, like
Yeah.
it somehow changed the product, that it was no longer my client's product. And I was like, well, the background's kind of nice. So it nailed that. But what I find is if I have a general idea, like show me a beer, somebody having a beer on a beach in Hawaii, it'll do that. But
Right.
it may not be my client's beer, the right beach, the right, so those are the things where I think it doesn't get there yet, but I think there's a likelihood that it will be one day.
You're right on that. I don't think there is a magic product yet that does exactly what we want, especially as creatives. We have an artistic vision that we want. What I've found so far is I can make parts of that tool and make that job easier. So rather
Yeah.
than me scroll for an hour trying to find a picture of a beach in a stock library on iStock or Getty
Yeah.
Images and stuff and still not finding the one that I want, or spending tens of thousands of dollars to fly somebody to the beach and take that specific shot, it's like, okay, well, let me just get the background. Give me a video background of a beach. And if I can name the beach and stuff, it'll probably do even
Oh, yeah.
better. And then most people don't notice that part of the story. And then I can shoot my stuff in front, or I can overlay my product into this background. And I'm creating the pieces, not the whole story. I can't just say, create this 30-second commercial that tells blah, blah, blah about ABC product. Not there yet at all. But if I get really micro with my ass, I find a lot more accuracy. It also depends on what you're trying to do and what the brand's image is. Like I think for Avenue 9, I'm an AI first stuff. So if people can tell, oh, that's an AI image, the fingers look weird. Well, I'm using AI. Like that's the whole point. It doesn't take away from the story. They're like, oh, at least he's practicing what he preaches there. But
Yeah.
I'm also not trying to fool people that was a real human. You know what I mean? And I'm
Yeah.
not trying to create a movie that's not gonna knock people out if the physics and stuff in the video aren't right, which is where it's kind of struggling now. So a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about AI, I think one of the challenges is, and it will be for a few years, it's just not there, but how do you get that authenticity that some brands require and some don't? And the cost of efficiency is really powerful. Your example of doing shoots, I mean, obviously we do a lot of shoots. I mean, we travel around, and a good part of what we sell is let's talk to your customers, let's be out in the field, let's go to your place, let's make this a real story. And we've been lucky to have clients that can afford to, send us on, shoots all over the place. And I love that and appreciate that, and, kind of live for that. That's, a lot of what I've done throughout my career. And I think when I started the business, that was one of my biggest fears, is like, oh shoot, what if I never get a client that can afford to pay for a shoot? Or, like I'm just gonna be stuck with a photo library of iStock for the rest of my life. And luckily that wasn't the case. But I do think AI has changed the speed significantly, not just like you said, looking for images, but how fast we can complete a task and how efficient we can make a workflow. And there's just so many different, from a project management standpoint, it's incredible. From a creative standpoint, it's incredible. From a research standpoint, it's incredible. There's just a lot that we can do. And how transparent you are with everybody about what you're using and how you're using it is the other key to that, I think.
I agree. You nailed some great stuff there. You also put Grammarly as one of your favorite AI tools, which, as somebody who's a little dyslexic myself, it's definitely on everything that I write and publish. Can we nerd out on Grammarly for a second? Why is that your favorite?
Well, yes, you brought up dyslexia, and I, oddly enough, didn't find out until I was in college that I was dyslexic. So I, looking back at report cards, I think I probably harassed my parents for a really long time when they, probably after I graduated from college, my mom's like, "Oh, look, I created a binder of all of your report cards for the last," seriously, mom, I was like not the best student. Why?
Yeah.
Why would you
You
do?
were saving all these anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like first grade, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Messing, which love her, still remember her, greatest teacher, just amazing person. But she wrote like, "I think Tim might have a learning disability." I was like, "Mom, Dad, what the heck?" So for me,
Something would have been nice to know 20 years ago, Mom.
yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for all those like sleepless nights about worrying about getting my homework done, or like struggling through standardized tests where I was mixing up words and didn't understand how I got the answer wrong, kind of a thing. So for me, Grammarly is a huge crutch for me. I would write emails, and then all of a sudden I'd send them and I'd get them back. And I'm like, oh my God, how did I misspell a word? Or how did I miss a punctuation? Or how did that even get in there? It's like I talked to text, but I was typing it, So Grammarly that way has really changed, enabled me to be quick and coherent and, get my point across and reduce the amount of words that I use and just make it sound smooth and accurate. And it's incredible.
I'm so glad I asked that question, because I've had that similar experience, and we just, found common ground. That I used to get C's in English and I would get A's in all the other classes. But, if there was ever a chance that I was going to fail a class, it was going to be English, and it was going to be for grammar and spelling mistakes. And it wasn't until college for me, I did find out I was dyslexic in high school. I took the placement tests and I scored A's in like the 99 percentile on all of them. In the spelling section, I went 0 for 20. I missed every one. And they were like, if you can't read, how did you even read the questions to get the other questions right. Like, were you cheating on this? Like, what happened? And I'm like, no, I just can't spell. I can read. I'm not an idiot. Like, I just like,
Yeah.
I can't spell. Every word's different. You showed me words I'd never seen before. I don't know. Like, I can't do it. And so my, process was always kind of just memorizing words rather than, having that innate ability or anything. So I got to college and I had this teacher who, it still gets me choked up a little bit, said, like, you hear the music and words. He's like, that's what editors are for. He's like, you just write the story. I'll have somebody that's great at grammar review it and rewrite it for you. And that's kind of the time spell check and stuff was coming in. And it changed the game for me. I was like, oh, I am a good writer. I'm a good storyteller. I just am not a good speller. And so Grammarly, it was on all my words. And out of this day, I've written multiple books. I've wrote like 10,000 words a week for one of the companies that I worked for. And Grammarly keeps your stats and everything. And it's so funny, like accuracy is still my lowest, but I was like the most prolific and used the most words and all kinds of things in the stats. And it really changed my confidence, was I think is huge. Hopefully AI does that for other people like it did for us.
Yeah. Everything I do. I mean, every day, whatever I'm, whether it's a social post or an email I'm sending to a client, we're working on a presentation, a proposal, like all of those things, everything gets ran through there. Just it takes 2 minutes. It's not it's not like a gigantic time sucker, but the level of accuracy and detail to information and clarity is incredible. So yeah, that's easily my number one AI tool that I use.
Awesome. Well, last question for you is the fun one. If you had to predict where all of this goes, what do you think the world with AI looks like? Let's say at least like 15 years from now, or you can dream in our lifetime. Is there a sci-fi movie that you think we will most represent, or what do you hope the world looks like?
Okay, so you're great at asking multiple questions
I
at a
am.
time. All right, so I'm going to go in reverse order. So, and we've talked about this before. Like, if I could teleport, that would be my number one thing.
Oh,
If that can happen in my lifetime, I'm in. I'm all for it. I love to drive, but I feel like in the last, 10, 20 years, I've driven so much from commuting to work for a very, very long time to, travel sports with kids and going all over the place. Like, if I could teleport everybody to wherever we wanted to be, I'm in for sure, 1000%. When we talk about AI and the future of AI and what's going to happen with technology, that's just a loaded question. One of the things.
Yes. What do our lives look like 30 years from now?
So I'm gonna go backwards and go forward. And this is kind of a cautionary tale, I think, for everybody. So, when my career started, computers were just really becoming a thing in visual arts and communication and kind of the entire industry, whether it was photography or videos or whatever. Computers were kind of becoming a thing. And I think people at first hesitated, like, well, I don't know that it's really going to replace everything we do, and the internet was out and they're going, well, the internet is a thing, but people really like print. We're not going to put everything on the internet. And everybody challenged that. And it was like, are you sure? Because I feel like this is pretty cool. I mean, it's at your fingertips, literally on your computer. No, everybody likes to have print. Everybody wants to touch something. We're all about touching. I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden you started to see digital cameras come out, and everybody, and a lot of studio time, a lot of work with photographers back in the day. And I used to have boxes and boxes of film. In fact, I've got, I'm at my home office right now, but I have a big studio and an office there. I have a big loop that I've had forever that I used to look at, 120 millimeter slides on and things like that. And, everybody was like, it's not going to be a thing. It's not going to be a thing. Well, you keep fast forwarding through this. Well, digital marketing, that's kind of a fad. I think, the basis of marketing is all of it has changed. Every time somebody in my career over the last, 20 or 30 years has been, well, I don't know that that's going to happen. We're going to just hedge our bets for now. Things aren't going to change that much. Everything has changed. And so, there's no way that AI isn't going to change the landscape of communications and marketing, the way that computers, the internet, and digital cameras, both still and motion, have changed, this industry. AI is going to change it and shape it as much as those things have. There's absolutely no question in my mind. It's coming. It's here. Now, to the conversation we had earlier, can it do everything I want it to do now to the quality? No. Will it? Sure. I mean, growing up, we had Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and they were nothing compared to what's happening today. I saw, in the Super Bowl, if you saw that ad for How to Train Your Dragon, I don't know if you've ever seen the original movies, and it looks like they're just remaking it, but it's still an animated film, and it looks really close to live action. Like, that's happening.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest lessons. I've only heard one person so far say that AI is a fad, like they're going to get sued by copyright things and it's going to go away. It's going to be the Napster of things. But I kind of challenged them and I was like, well, Napster didn't go away. It just became iTunes. Like the digital music was the thing there, right? Unlimited, getting every song on every device exists today. That didn't go away. And so whether ChatGPT wins or not remains to be seen, but AI is not going away. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. And the other thing you hear all the time is like, this is the worst it will ever be. Like it's not going to get worse. This isn't peak AI. This is the beginning of it. And so I'm excited to really see. I mean, we could have, Star Trek Next Generation holodecks or video, like you said, that if you think about the first digital cameras, I still have some grainy, tiny pictures that were just a few hundred pixels wide. And we thought that was cool and found a use case for it. And now, you have more than 4K HD cameras that you can take on shoots and get super high speeds or super fine details and zooms that were never even imaginable 20 years ago.
Yeah. And things that you could never do with film. That's what's incredible when you talk about cameras and motion stuff. Like there was things that we would attempt to do on film and we did pretty well for the time, but looking back, like there's no way. Like there's things that we're doing now that just couldn't be done, and we can go back and replicate a lot of what film did. I know, I mean, we still shoot some film sometimes and, rarely, but it's happened. Somebody wanted that kind of a look or feel, and I'm into it. I think it's cool. It's nostalgic and I like it, but practically it's not practical.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson to wrap up on here is that, film didn't go away. Horses and buggies didn't go away. You can still take a carriage ride in cities and stuff here in Kansas City on the downtown plaza to look at the Christmas lights and stuff. It's amazing. But I wouldn't travel to work like that every day, and just like all these things that we're talking about, film cameras won't cease to exist, and there's still reasons and use cases for that. Or like you said, the even the high-end artistic storytelling, like somebody has to fly to Hawaii and get the photo shot or the video on the beach and do it live and have the money to create a really awesome story. But a small business here in Kansas City is probably not it. You know what I mean? And we can't just keep making a photocopy of a photocopy all the time, or it's going to degrade. And so there's going to be cases where AI makes everything. There's going to be cases where humans make everything on film and artistic and creations and artisan work. And then there's going to be a gigantic blend of the middle where you have to pick each tool for what it is. So Tim, I appreciate you taking the time today. Tim Kalinowski, you can connect with him on LinkedIn or loretold.com. How can you help us, or how can we help you, Tim?
Look, I'm always grateful to meet new people and, find new experiences that we can share, whether it's, on a platform like this, or whether it's, working together, just meeting each other and sharing ideas. I'm good with all of it.
Sounds great. Again, connect with them, loretold.com. You can find Avenue 9 at avenue9.com. Like we said during the show, I help people collect their best stories and create custom GPTs to help them create, content or even just find your story, interview your founder, your top salesperson, your best client, and find a way to articulate what you're good at, and get that human part in first, so that then we can use AI to amplify your story. Until next time, keep going, have fun with it, everybody.